Speaking of the MCU universe, we're gonna have to go to their version of Civil War, which was a loose adaptation of the 2006 comic arc of the same name. In that comic, it's centered around the idea of pro versus anti-registration sides after a disaster that caused the death of many civilians. The film would center largely around the idea that there should be superhero accords, so kind of the same concept, but also detoured a bit onto Steve Rogers and his need to keep Bucky Barnes safe. That was a huge part of that movie. It was a lot of why he was anti-accord. It was. This film would culminate in the reveal, for Tony at least, that the Winter Soldier, aka the aforementioned Bucky Barnes, was the person who had killed his parents. This causes him to go off the deep end because he was not the most stable person in this movie. He would end up battling full out with the Winter Soldier and Captain America, and we would get actually an admittedly very cool fight scene where the two teamed up to take him down. This climactic battle would result in a moment that in my theater at least actually elicited audible gasps from the audience. It's the moment where at the end, Captain America brings down his shield right down the center of Iron Man's chest, right where his arc reactor used to be, which a few films earlier would have killed him, and even then leaves him there in the cold, in that hideout with no power. It was an intense moment. Defeated, and he lost his friends. I mean, although he had been imprisoning them, it was not the best look for Tony in either Civil War. This movie would divide fans into pro Iron Man and pro Cap camps for quite a while. Number 9, Original Sin, aka Original Retcons. This was a Marvel event from 2014, wherein it was revealed that there were secrets in the Marvel Universe, original sins, because we were playing upon the biblical allegory here. So, what was Iron Man's original sin? Well, it was revealed that he had tampered with the gamma bomb that had caused Bruce Banner to become the Hulk. And when Bruce figures this out, he is of course enraged. So he manages to get a hold of some extremist tech so that he can hold on to his Bruce Banner consciousness when he transforms into the Hulk, so that he can go and confront Tony properly. And confront him he does, taking out his Hulkbuster armor in literally one punch. Just one punch. He was the One Punch Man. Tony survives the fight by running away to get more armor. A loss or a strategic retreat? You decide. Number 8, Thor. After the comic book Civil War, a lot of heroes had some strong feelings towards Tony. I mean, Thor ended up being cloned by Reed in this arc. Just they needed a big, heavy muscle guy on their team, so they cloned Thor. Nobody likes being cloned without their consent. I mean, Tony was creating alternate dimension prisons. It was just not going well. After this, him and Thor would end up getting into it. And it's important to remember here that Thor is indeed a god, and Tony is a guy in some really souped up armor, which he actually has to remind Thor of because Thor is dismantling him so thoroughly, throwing him up into the air, ripping his mask off, just pieces coming off everywhere. He needs to be calmed down because that could have gone pretty intensely. He made his point though, and for many fans they felt it was a take that Tony moment, because after Civil War there was a lot of take that, Tony. Despite the fact that reviews said that the comic was balanced and nuanced, which I think if it had been, there wouldn't have been as much take that, Tony.
And at 7, Dr. Doom. Victor Von Doom may not originate as an Avengers villain, but he's come into conflict with the team in the comics many a time, along with some of their members individually over the years. He's perhaps one of the most nerve-wracking villains thanks to his abilities. Victor is a scientist, a sorcerer, an inventor, and a polymath with a genius-level intellect. He can manipulate electricity, project and absorb energy, create protective shields, and can summon demons thanks to that sorcery. But perhaps his most defiant traits are his remarkably indomitable will and his code of honor. He once saved Captain America from drowning because Cap had saved his life in the past. He knows how to take advantage of a situation and can be cunning and manipulative when he needs to be. Combining technology and sorcery has made him quite deadly. Now that the rights for the character and the Fantastic Four are in the hands of Marvel Studios and Disney, I'm sure we'll eventually see Dr. Doom make an appearance in the MCU. Whether or not that'll have anything to do with the Avengers though, who knows? And at number 6, Thanos. Technically this is true. The first time around in Infinity War, Thanos defeated the Avengers and was successful in his plan to eliminate half of all living things in the universe. And then in the Prime timeline in Endgame, he used the stones to destroy the stones before Thor decapitated him. The second time around in Endgame, when 2014 Thanos showed up on the Prime timeline, he almost defeated them again if it weren't for Tony Stark sacrificing himself to kill off Thanos and his army once and for all. All of the spoilers in this number. Needless to say, if another timeline Thanos popped into the Prime timeline again, we know that the Mad Titan would be one hell of a threat for the Avengers, with or without the Infinity Stones in his possession. And at number 5, Magus. Who's worse than Thanos? Well, how about the guy who ends up wielding the gauntlet in the comics after Thanos fails? Rather, the guy's evil self. We're talking about Adam Warlock's less ethical other half, Magus. So for context, during Warlock's cosmic travels, he comes across the Universal Church of Truth and their god, a fellow named Magus. Turns out that Magus is himself from the future, a corrupted version who occasionally pops up to screw with Adam. Magus believes that the concepts of good and evil are tools that allow one to change sentient beings and craves all to worship him. And if they don't, he'll just kill them. What about his powers? Well, he's got cosmic awareness, he's a shapeshifter, he can summon the in-betweener, he can manipulate energy, absorb a being's life force, he uses quantum magic, can manipulate time and transmute reality, is psionic, and of course possesses superhuman strength and all that jazz. Overall, he's incredibly deadly. I think I'd probably prefer to stick to Adam Warlock instead. In at 4, Sentry aka Void. Sentry aka Robert Reynolds may have only been introduced into the Marvel Universe back in 2000, but he's definitely not a threat to take lightly. He was granted his powers from a super soldier serum that moves his molecules an instant ahead of the current timeline, although in the Age of Sentry miniseries it's implied that he's actually a refugee sentient life force from another universe. He's a little like Superman to an extent, but said to be omnipotent, who generally holds back his full might. When he was first introduced though, Robert was a depressed chubby dude who started remembering a different past, which unravels the truth, that he existed in the Marvel Universe all along, but everyone's memories have been altered to forget him entirely. This is because Robert was trying to suppress Void, an entity within him who has all the same powers as Sentry does. He can shapeshift, control weather, and create something called Infinity Trundles too, which attacks one's mind in traumatic ways. He's gone toe-to-toe with some of the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe as well. Needless to say, you can imagine why the Avengers would prefer Sentry over Void.
Number 3, Superior Iron Man. Ah yes, evil Tony Stark, who was around after the Axis event, which was an event where you saw heroes and villains swapped. And everyone went back to normal except for Tony, who not everybody was aware was evil Tony for a little bit. Well, in issue 9 of the Superior Iron Man, he would end up battling it out with Pepper Potts, who was in some Iron Man armor of her own, which was deemed inferior Iron Man armor. However, despite this, she was able to get the armor off of Superior Tony Iron Man with an electromagnetic pulse, which was pretty satisfying, just that she knew all the kind of little secrets to dismantle him. Pepper's put up with a lot over the years. So much more in the comics. So much more. Number 2, Avengers X Sanction, aka Iron Man fights Cable, and you know you want to see that. Cable was definitely there when it came down to protecting Hope Summers, even though he was being overwhelmed by the techno-organic virus inside his body, but I mean that hasn't stopped him before and it doesn't stop him here. He was actually able to defeat Tony by using some future Stark technology that Tony had not invented yet, which of course he uses to mock Tony with to no end. He's even able to corrupt and overwhelm Tony's suit and then punches him right up into the Red Hulk. It's just never a great time to be Tony. Definitely not on this list. It was pretty cool design for Cable with this, with the reactor right in the center, his metal arm, just, you know, all the Cableness. And finally, in at number 1. I think you were waiting for it. I think you know what it is. That's right, it's Civil War II. The event's so nice they did it twice. Here we have a lot of the same story beats being covered, but instead we have Iron Man in the role of Cap and Captain Marvel Carol Danvers in the role of Iron Man. This one would center around the Minority Report dilemma. There should be stop crimes before they happen. Is that ethical or right? Well, after War Machine, who was at the time Carol's boyfriend, gets frizzed, she is 100% for we need to stop all these crimes before they even happen, and she is off. This ultimately ends up with a giant climactic battle where she beats Tony to death. This is a moment that would cause a lot of contention, especially because there was a decent amount of contention surrounding Carol at this point in time anyway. So it was very quickly dealt with in the comics with, oh no, but Tony had an AI, and then that AI built a body, and we can all just pretend that that AI is Tony. Yes, let's do that. But yeah, Tony died hard.
Coming in at number 10, we have Don't Mess with Batman. It will always be somewhat of a mystery as to how Guy Gardner is able to hold on to his lantern ring. The dude is kind of rude and childish, but I will admit he has pulled off some pretty impressive things as a lantern. He's just not what you would expect from a member of the most renowned space cops, and there have been plenty of times when Guy has crossed the line, like when he was forced to work under Batman with the Justice League International. Guy didn't think this made any sense. Why was a dude in a bat suit telling him what to do? Why was Guy Gardner not the one who was running the team? So Guy kept going on about how he should have been at the helm. He was whining, complaining, and insulting Batman. So Batman wanted to get everyone in order the fastest way possible and one-punched Guy Gardner. He literally knocked the dude out, a Green Lantern in one shot. So if Guy had any questions about who should be in charge, they would have all been answered as soon as he woke up and put his nose back in place. This was hero on hero, but for Guy, this was still pretty damn embarrassing to get floored from one shot. Coming in at number 9, we have the Lantern Club. I mean, if I was a villain with super strength, I would have done the same move. It's really killing 2 birds with 1 stone, or 2 supers with 1 super. If you flip open the comic Countdown to Crisis issue 3, you will see 2 heroes squaring off against 1 villain. In the hero's corner, you have Troya and Hal Jordan, a powerful team up that would normally come out victorious. And in the villain's corner, we have Mary Marvel, a villain that sounds like she should be in a straight-to-DVD Christmas special, but in this encounter, she showed that she's no slouch. When she takes on the 2 do-gooders, she quickly knocks down Troya and then snags Hal by his ankle, and then proceeds to beat Troya with Hal using the lantern like a club. And just like that, you have both of them bloodied and beaten. Really, that was the most effective way to get the job done. Coming in at number 8, we have Spider-Man versus The Spot. The Spot will go down as one of the worst Spider-Man villains ever, but that doesn't mean that he wasn't able to get one over on Spidey. For those of you who don't know, The Spot is a villain that is covered with small portals all over his body. Think of him as the game portal, where you go in one portal and you come out the other, even if it defies the laws of physics. In their encounter, Spider-Man tries to punch The Spot and ends up clocking himself in the face. It was like a grade school bully going, "Stop hitting yourself. Stop hitting yourself."
Number 7, Contest of Champions 2. Let them fight. There's something about that plot that just captures the imagination of fans. Just pitted together, normally on an island-style location, and forced to duke it out. Well, this happened in Contest of Champions 2, and Iron Man was pitted against mutant powerhouse Psylocke. Now, at first they were pretty evenly matched because her psychic attacks weren't really working on him because his armor could see through them, because she tried some psychological tricks. However, ultimately, because she had nanites inside of her, she was able to deliver this flurry of rapid-fire blows that were also backed up by her psionic abilities, and that took him out. If you're gonna use the Goku punch strategy, then the other person gotta be prepared, and sometimes your armor just can't take that, and this was one of those times. Number 6, Rogue. This comes to us from X-Men Legacy 267. This was during the whole Avengers versus X-Men arc lead up surrounding everything. This is where the Phoenix Force and Hope Summers were viewed as the saviors of mutant kind. However, by other heroes, it was viewed as more of a threat because, the Phoenix Force, pretty dangerous. Cap and Iron Man would go hard trying to capture Hope Summers, and this would lead them into many conflicts with the X-Men. Iron Man actually goes to Xavier's school, Institute, Jean Grey's, whatever we're calling it at that point, and finds himself having to take on Rogue. And even though he points out that he's beaten her once before, she says that that was a different time. And then he also makes the mistake of attacking Gambit, which sends Rogue into a berserker-like rage, and she channels the She-Hulk's powers and just literally punches right through him. She just pummels him till all his armor is just bits on the ground. It's a good thing these armors are durable, / sometimes he's not actually in them, because otherwise he'd be dead several times over, which we're gonna get to later on. Dead Tony, that is. Don't mess with Rogue, or apparently more importantly, don't mess with Gambit. Number 5, the Winter Soldier. That's right, Bucky Barnes gets to make this list twice, but this time from the comic book universe. The return of Bucky Barnes was a huge event in comic book fandom, because for a time he had been viewed as one of these sacred deaths, one of those characters that was not coming back. However, things changed, and his return arc was pretty well received. In Captain America 33, which followed Civil War, well, he was out to get some revenge on Tony, because at the end of Civil War, Captain America was assassinated on the courthouse steps. So Bucky felt that this was Iron Man's fault, using the whole "if you two hadn't been fighting and this hadn't happened, he wouldn't have been there" kind of logic. So the two would get into it, and ultimately Bucky would get the upper hand by pushing him into a set of power lines that would overload his suit, which you would think that would happen a lot more often. I feel like I should be taking notes. Bucky Barnes is all the simple tricks. Number 4, What If Spider-Man Back in Black, which for a while I was like, that sounds like an album title, and then I remembered that it was AC/DC. I redeemed myself. This What If takes us back to, again, some events from Civil War. After Peter revealed his identity at Tony's behest, it did not go well for him, and Aunt May ended up getting shot. Well, on this What If, it's Mary Jane who gets shot, and Spider-Man goes right off the deep end, even though in main canon he was willing to sacrifice his marriage and memories of being with her to get Aunt May back. But you know what? That's neither here nor there. We're talking about Back in Black. In this comic, he decides that he's gonna put that black suit back on, he's gonna go get revenge, and he's out to kill. Well, he ends up getting getting into a fight with Iron Man. And he actually puts his hand over the repulsor ray, which causes it to reflect back on Tony. This takes him out, puts him down for the count, and Peter can go off on his killing spree. Just everybody and all the realities, Civil War.
Coming in at number 3, we have Superman is trusting and dumb. Not how you would think to describe the Man of Steel, but when you hear how Lex Luthor was able to trick him, you'll be on my side. There was a comic where Superman is approached by a tailor, a guy who seemed to be a kind fellow who just wanted to do a good deed for the man who keeps the city safe. You can tell that this is an older comic. When was the last time a tailor approached you randomly and offered to make you a suit? Well, this mystery man offers to give the Man of Steel a brand new suit that will freshen up his image. Superman thinks this is amazing and accepts. The tailor makes him this suit, and without questioning anything, he puts it on. I think this might have been a case of superhero privilege. You think that you should be getting gifts from strangers at any time of the day. Well, it turns out this generous tailor was actually Lex Luthor in disguise. You think the world's greatest hero would be on the watch for the one person who's trying to kill him 24/7, but I guess he let this one slip. Oh, and there's more. Lex Luthor planted a trap in the suit. He sewed a lead-covered clump of kryptonite into the suit, which Superman never noticed. He didn't take the half second to look at the suit with his X-ray vision. Nope, there's literally a bomb in his clothes that will expose him to his weakness at the worst moment, and it was given to him in person by his arch-enemy. Lex Luthor would have had to put Superman through a whole fitting process, and he still didn't pick up on it. Coming in at number 2, we have Tin Can Iron Man. As time goes on, we have seen heroes and villains become more intricate. The way that they fight, how they can be beaten, how they use their powers. For the most part, all of these things have become more exciting. But when some heroes were originally crafted, they didn't have such interesting pieces to them. For this slip up, let's head all the way back to Avengers number 2. In this issue, the team of Earth's mightiest heroes has an enemy they never thought they would have to face: themselves. Well, kinda. See, they take on Space Phantom. This is a villain who can copy any form exactly. There's literally nothing off about his imitations, and this was his plan to beat the Avengers by turning them on each other. This was Civil War before Civil War. At first the Avengers are fooled, but then they learn his tricks, and while the Space Phantom is a perfect imitation of Iron Man, Thor is able to stop him by making it rain. And not in the cool way. He didn't throw a stack of cash in his face. Literally, rain comes down and it rusts the perfect imitation of Iron Man so he can't move. I know some of you at home are going to complain because it was Space Phantom that was beaten and not Iron Man, but it was a perfect imitation of Iron Man, meaning that Iron Man could have also be beaten by rust, which is one of the most embarrassing things that Iron Man could have learned about himself. And coming in at the number 1 spot, we have the Justice League losing to Killer Frost. There's no shortage of villains that have ice powers. When it comes to Killer Frost, she's okay. She's never really had a moment to shine. She isn't really a villain that any S-tier hero would even bother with. She would be happy to see Elastic Man show up to fight her. But there was one time when her and the Suicide Squad were taking on the Boy in Blue, and Enchantress was able to smash Superman so hard he was laying on the ground immobilized. Soup has always had trouble with magic users. Well, Killer Frost was there and saw this as a golden opportunity. She used her powers to suck Superman's energy dry, draining him of his life force and his powers. She then flew off and took out the entire Justice League. Now, while it being hard for anyone from the League to take down someone that powerful, the fact that they let someone like Killer Frost get the drop on them, that is pretty embarrassing. This is one of the biggest upsets in comic book history.
And at number 10, Taskmaster. Taskmaster's got some pretty neat abilities. After injecting himself with a Nazi-created primer, aka a modified adrenal steroid cortisol, his mind's procedural memory potential was unlocked, allowing him to absorb knowledge immediately. This extends to his muscle memory, meaning when he sees someone fight, he can mimic their moves, making him a rather difficult individual to battle since he can predict what other characters will do next in a fight. The only person who manages to evade this ability of Taskmaster's is Deadpool, due to the character being so darn unpredictable. In the comics, Taskmaster actually has defeated multiple Avenger characters, including Hank Pym's Yellow Jacket and the Wasp, and managed to fight both Iron Man and Captain America without completely getting his butt kicked. While it would be really darn lucky if Taskmaster managed to defeat the whole team, he's still got a decent chance of throwing them off guard and getting the upper hand if coming at them unprepared, or if they fought him with no knowledge of his abilities. Although these days in the comics he's considerably less threatening, having joined the Secret Avengers despite having a history of being a sleeper agent. Moving on to number 9, Cyclops. Cyclops is one of the original X-Men members, meaning it's likely that in the future of the MCU, whenever the X-Men are introduced, we'll be seeing Scott Summers make an appearance, running with the good guys. But he isn't always good in the comics. comics. During the Avengers vs. X-Men story event, Cyclops was a major threat to the Avengers, and like the main antagonist in that story arc. Subjectively speaking. In this story arc, Cyclops becomes possessed by the Phoenix Force, and he essentially conquers Earth, which forces the Avengers into hiding. Cyclops would eventually lose control of the Phoenix Force, becoming Dark Phoenix, and he would kill Charles Xavier. But he is later defeated by his daughter, Hope Summers, and Scarlet Witch. Not saying that we'll be seeing Scott's more nefarious side anytime soon, but it's something that once upon a time was a prominent threat, so who knows how things may pan out in the future. And at number 8, MODOK. MODOK is a villain that's existed in the comics since 1967, created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. And in case you're wondering, his name stands for mental organism designed only for killing, or at least that's what he made his name stand for. The M also sometimes stands for mobile or mechanized, might I add. Anywho, he was initially an employee of AIM before they used him for an experiment, which turned him into MODOK, and he rebelled against them, taking over AIM in the process. He's not only got a superhuman intellect in that big ol' head of his, he's got psionic powers and the ability to calculate probabilities too. Here's the thing though, the likelihood that we'd ever see MODOK entering the live-action MCU doesn't seem super viable. Recently, the character was announced to be getting his own animated series on Disney's streaming service, and it seems to be an adaptation that will make the character more of an anti-hero rather than a flat-out villain. Plus, I don't think anyone ever wants to imagine the possibility of MODOK manipulating Carol Danvers into thinking he's a hot little piece that she can make out with. Yes, that actually happened in the comics. Moving on.
Coming in at number 7, we have Pants, Punched, and KO'd. Not all supers come from Marvel and DC, so when I get a chance I like to sneak in some moments from outside the superhero norms. For this one, we're gonna head into the world of anime to one of my favorite shows, My Hero Academia. In season 1, we have the Sports Festival, where new promising heroes go up against each other for the entertainment of the people. In this tournament, we see Aoyama, who has a belly laser power similar to Cyclops, but it comes out of his stomach. He goes up against Ashido, who has acid powers. The two square off in a short scrap that ends with Ashido blasting Aoyama's belt line with acid. This causes his pants to fall down, and Ashido slides in and uppercuts him unconscious. So getting knocked out while you're scrambling to pull up your pants, yeah, that's one of the worst ways to go out. Coming in at number 6, we have Packing on the Pounds. You only have to look at comic books for about 4 seconds to get enough unrealistic body standards to give an entire generation of people body dysmorphia. So when one hero puts on enough pounds that he couldn't even use his powers, that really sticks out, especially when your power is how fast you can move. I mean, if this was to happen to the Blob, I don't think anyone would notice. Being big is kind of his thing. Who were we talking about? Well, of course, the Flash. When we zoom back to the Silver Age of comics, we find an issue when one of the Flash's arch enemies, Gorilla Grodd, comes up with a plan to stop the speedster from running, and it's simple but effective. He makes him get so fat that he can't use his powers anymore. Grodd zaps the Flash with a ray that makes him retain water without him knowing. This made him bulk up until he literally weighed a ton. It would be pretty embarrassing to go from the fastest man alive to the star of My 600-Pound Life. Coming in at number 5, we have Wolverine Gets a Girl's Touch. Known for being one of the coolest characters in the Marvel Universe, it must have hurt to have his body tossed through building after building from one shot from a 12-year-old girl. In issue 12 of The Runaways, Wolverine is hot on the tail of Cloak. He eventually tracks down Cloak, and lo and behold, he's being protected by Molly Hayes, aka Princess Powerful. He tries to negotiate, but things turn violent pretty quickly. Downside for Logan is that Molly is probably one of the strongest mutants ever, and with one touch he's fired out of there like a snot rocket in the shower. Getting beat up by a girl must have not been the easiest emotional scar to get rid of. Coming in at number 4, we have the Yellow Room. Lanterns are very particular about colors. Some are good, some are bad, and there's a spectrum, blah 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 blah. While in All-Star Batman and Robin, we see Hal Jordan get pranked, triggered, and beat up by his least favorite color, yellow. Batman is going out of his way to mess with Hal Jordan, decides to explore his artistic side and paint a room yellow. That's quite the statement. This of course sets Hal off when he walks in, but I don't think he was ready for what was about to happen next. A young Robin slips in and manages to pickpocket Hal's ring right off his finger, and then the teenager whoops his ass. Losing your ring, getting humiliated in a yellow room, and getting KO'd by a teenager, that is a rough one.
Moving on to number 3, Mephisto. Mephisto is literally Marvel's version of the devil. He's based on Mephistopheles, the demon from the Foss legend, and first appeared back in the Silver Age in 1968 in The Silver Surfer issue 3. Written by Stan Lee, the character would be a tempter who offered the Silver Surfer the world, dangling his off-limits long-distance lover in front of him too. All things that the Surfer rejected thanks to his goodness and nobility. But thus started a pattern with the character in the comics. He's constantly used as a vehicle for temptation, making deals with the devil. And he's always always a character ready to take advantage of a situation. Hell, he even hung out with Thanos while the Mad Titan had the Infinity Stones in the 1991 Infinity Gauntlet series, knowing that the Mad Titan was emotionally unstable. So what makes him deadly? Well, he's an immortal entity with magical powers, capable of a whole lot. He can alter time, alter memories, project illusions, shape and size shift, has superhuman strength and durability. And if his physical form is destroyed, he can regenerate and reform in his home domain. So why make deals with characters? Well, Mephisto cannot subjugate the will of another without their permission, which is why he manipulates them through pacts. So you can see how something like that could get real tricky for the Avengers of the MCU. The closest we've ever gone to that kind of deep-rooted manipulation was likely in Age of Ultron, when Scarlet Witch manipulated their minds. And, well, that kinda screwed a few of them up for a little while, so Mephisto could be an issue. In at 2, Galactus. Next to Thanos, Galactus is one of the biggest bads to ever find himself in the panels of Marvel Comics. But here's the thing about Galactus. He's not evil per se. Rather, the reason Galactus does what he does best, going around and devouring planets, is because he's fulfilling his hunger. He's essential to the balance of the universe. Guess no one filled Thanos in on that, did they? In the MCU, that is. Yet in the comics, Galactus has been a major threat of the planets, having decided on Earth as a planet suitable for his consumption. So, needless to say, he would be a gigantic threat for the Avengers if he ever did come their way. And finally, in at number 1, Korvac. Korvac first appeared in 1975 in Giant Size Defenders issue 3, created by Jim Starlin, who also created Thanos, and Steve Gerber. Initially, Korvac was meant to be a throwaway character, a dude named Michael Korvac who hailed from Earth 691 and went through some serious crap. He was a computer technician who, after the alien Brotherhood of Badoon invaded his planet, was punished by them when falling asleep at work, turning his upper body into a machine, essentially making him a cyborg. He's used by the Grandmaster as a pawn in battling Doctor Strange and the Defenders, but after an encounter with the Guardians and Thor, he became a real threat. Enter the Korvac saga. Korvac fled his universe and came to Earth 616, where he stumbles upon Galactus' space station and decides to download Galactus' knowledge into his own body. This causes him to be imbued with the power cosmic, essentially becoming a god, and he decides to reshape Earth into a utopia. Elders of the universe begin to sense his existence. The Collector, in an act of protection, decides to remake his own daughter, Karina, into a powerful being to use as a weapon against him, but she and Korvac fall in love. Korvac is eventually found out by the heroes of Earth and is forced into battle, killing a ton of heroes in the process. And after defeating them all, what does he do? He commits suicide after sensing that Karina doubts him, and in the process restores the Avengers and Guardians to life before he dies. While the Korvac saga has been occasionally criticized for its storyline, you can't deny that he'd make an interesting villain for the Avengers to take on in the future of the MCU, especially now that there's all these alternate realities that are popping up and exist.